Good evening, morning. It's morning. I was up quite late last night. Yes, hello everyone. I'm going to be hoping this is going out now, so it'd be quite good if someone could explain to me because I've no other way of telling. I'm on my Todd. Graham is gallivanting again, I think. So I thought we'd discuss a few things related to. Well, I wanted to start off actually with what I thought was a really good bit from Question Time yesterday. I don't, as people know, I don't watch television at all, but I see clips. There are some good people on Twitter who will clip things. And actually, there was an incredibly good point made by Wes Streeting on Question Time, which I had not considered. So the sounds a bit like it's the highest it can possibly be. Sorry about that. You'll just have to turn it up at your end. I so with the National Service policy announcement, which is basically dying on its arse. Let's be honest. It should have been. I can put the microphone a bit closer to me. It should have been checked out first because as soon as Rishi Sunak announced it, as soon as the Tories announced it last weekend, there were some right-wing commentators who were going, oh yeah, brilliant idea, yeah, great idea. They were getting right on board with it. The Tory client press were obviously doing their best with it. But quite a lot of right-wing commentators were going, no, what? Even Tory MPs were going, what? Are you mad? You know, are you trying to actually destroy the youth vote completely? Because the latest polling has the Conservatives winning about 4% of young people. It's like, are you trying to drive it down to zero? What are you doing? And there's various reasons why it's a bad policy, and there's various reasons why it's also poor strategically. Because you can have a bad policy that works politically. I mean, the Tories have had nothing but, well, largely they've had nothing but bad policies for 14 years, but they've still won elections, so it clearly hasn't been a problem. But there was a really good argument used by Streeting yesterday, which I hope ends up being part of the TV debates, which are starting next week, next Tuesday evening, which is a real bugger because I'm in London on Wednesday, so I won't be able to talk about it. But anyway, what he said was that so this policy, right? The idea is people who are going to be 18 either next year or the year after are going to cop for this mandatory service if the Tories win again. And Wes Streeting said the people who are going to be 18 next year have already given their service. And it relates to the pandemic. So the people who are going to be 18 this year, next year, will have been 13, 14 when the pandemic hit, right? So what happened to these people? First of all, their education was severely disrupted. So I was a teacher at the time. I was very aware of this. But their education was disrupted. They were told they needed to stay in. They couldn't really do much to socialise with their friends. The closest they had was, as the image above shows me, out in public. Admittedly, later on, we sort of worked out the masks weren't as important outside because of ventilation. But at the time, we didn't know. And no contact with like flesh covered parts of you, so like bumping ankles and elbows. So young people were basically told to stay in, do the best they could with their schooling, because we as teachers we didn't really have the facilities. You know, you could do remote teaching. I was reasonably well set up for it because I do this, so I have webcams and software to broadcast. So you know, I had options that other teachers didn't. They would just have a basic webcam and just try their best with it, and Google Meet. But it was very difficult, and so they've had their education disrupted. They've had their social life disrupted for many years. You know, Wes Streeting made the point that these young people were told to stay inside, suffer all these privations, so that older people. Because remember, even though I, at the time in 2020, was saying, hang on, we cannot just behave as if young people are immune to this. The government were behaving as if young people were immune to it. The government were behaving as if it posed no threat to young people at all. So young people were being told to stay in, not for their own sake, but for older people. to protect older people, to stop older people becoming sick and dying. So Streeting was making the point there that actually young people have given their service, which I think is an excellent point. Absolutely excellent point. I'm ashamed I hadn't considered it myself, because it's and it's absolutely one that, if I'm not saying he wouldn't have come up with it on the spot, bear in mind, obviously Labour will have been discussing this, but it is absolutely something. If it comes up in the TV debates at any point, whether next week or another one, if Rishi Sunak tries to use this national service thing, I want Keir Starmer to fire straight back with that. Absolutely straight back with it. And it does two things as well. First of all, it is a really good point for anyone. Because even for because remember, Rishi Sunak is using this policy to try and appeal to older voters. Well, those older voters will think, yeah, my grandkids, they stayed in, because they may not have thought about this. Oh yeah, they've suffered these problems, they've hurt their education to help me. So it weakens any sort of appeal that this policy has on older people, and I think the Tories may be overstating it, but any appeal it does have is instantly downgraded, because then, you know, those older people who hear that argument go, yeah, my grandkids actually have already given their service, why should they do more? But also, for it sort of also cuts through to some younger people as well about the difference between them. How the Conservatives just want to, you know, they've already had their pound of flesh and they still want more. So a line like that really has the potential to turn this national service policy into a huge banana skin for the Tories, and I really hope they do it. But there we go. Shafted, given worse than predicted grades, made to do online classes while still expected to fork out $10,000 a year tuition fees and privilege. Oh, I mean, university students, yeah. It was. I mean, I know as a teacher as well. So I don't know from the university side of it. I worked in a college, but we were pretty disgusted when the results came out, and what we found out was that they had. So private schools had given inflated grades to their kids because their parents are like paying them directly, right? So they don't want the hassle. So they gave them all ridiculous grades, and the government let them do that. Now, I can tell you, as someone who was working in a college at the time, we had endless meetings. Because what we did, we thought to ourselves, right, as soon as we knew we were going to have to assign the grades, we said, right, we need to be able to withstand an audit. We were expecting to be heavily audited, heavily scrutinised. We said we need to make sure we've got all the evidence, and we were discussing in fine detail how we would have the evidence to justify the grades. Any inspector could have come in to our department, indeed the entire college, and picked out a student at random and says, "Why did you give them that grade?" We would have had loads of evidence to justify it. These private schools were just going, oh, give them that. I mean, my fiance more specifically knows, her friend of hers sends their kids to private school, and one of them is really lazy. They're not that bright. And they were given ridiculously inflated grades. And the thing is, it did them no good anyway, because they then went on to do A-levels as a result of them and failed badly. So it didn't even help them. But it was, you know, what happened was you had state-educated students given sensible grades that, you know, because the teachers were thinking to themselves, our reputations are on the line here. We don't want Ofsted coming in and saying we've just made up grades. So making sure it was really watertight. And private schools were just going, well, hang on a minute, you know, we don't give a crap about Ofsted. We do give a crap about the parents because they're going to hassle us. So just giving ridiculous grades. So it completely destroyed confidence in the grades for that entire generation as well. So, you know, you cannot overstate the sacrifices that particular age group have made. And to be told that we want even more from you for nothing, yeah, it's absolutely disgusting. Anyway, do I miss teaching, Phil? I do miss teaching. I don't miss... There is, I mean, it's like any other organisation as well. You do get plenty of nonsense in it. Or what I will say is, in teaching at least, It's maybe one of the few industries where your managers are not thick as mincemeat. They are, you know, you generally have intelligent, pragmatic managers, and most are absolutely fine. But it doesn't mean to say that sometimes you don't get a load of crap dumped on you as well. So I don't miss that. I'll tell you what I don't miss. I don't miss being told before summer, oh, next year this is going to be our push. We're going to do this thing. So I then work over summer, because that's what I used to do. I used to spend my summers getting ready for the next year. So I do lots of planning and create resources and things like that. Then you get back after summer and they go, oh, I've had a change in mind. We're going to be doing this now. It's like, so I'll just throw it all in the bin, do I? Okay, thank you. So I don't miss that. You know, there is a certain advantage. There is pros and cons to being an internet loudmouth. One of the advantages is no one dumps anything on your lap that unless you ask them to. Like, you know, you're on your own. With all the advantages and disadvantages for that. Right, let's go through a few other random things then. Labour need to make private schools follow the national curriculum, be inspected by Ofsted. At the very least, I think it will be tricky to insist they follow the national curriculum, but at the very least, they should be inspected by Ofsted for safeguarding reasons, if nothing else. So yes, private schools should require there should be a licensing system which requires Ofsted visits. It's totally unjustified that they don't have to be inspected. Ivan Ambrose, $4.99. What about the latest Tory Mark Logan switching to Labour? Do you know what? I just have no idea at this point. Because obviously it's like really weird. It's just basically applying to be a Labour member because he's not an MP anymore. Technically, he defected on the last day he was an MP, but he didn't publish the letter until the next day when he wasn't. So, really weird. I don't know. All that's really happened there is a Tory MP. I mean, I imagine, was this... See, when they were sort of saying we were expecting another defection if the election hadn't been called, and there was talk of it being a former minister, this isn't a former minister. I can't really... He was only made an MP in 2009. I don't even know who he is. 2019, sorry. I didn't finish my sentence. I don't know who he is at all. He's stepping down, so he's not going to be a Labour... I mean, none of them could be Labour candidates. So basically all that's happened here, although we call it a defection, which I suppose technically it is, all it really is a Tory MP stepping down and then choosing to leave the Conservative Party for the Labour Party. I mean... So I don't really know that there's anything newsworthy about it. It would have been different had Parliament still been going. But yeah. One angry pagan said, oh, sorry, I've lost the comment. Still many Brits with expertise in many scientific and technological fields in this country will Labour look to utilise these underutilised people. Well, yeah, that's their big thing, isn't it? Particularly with the sort of greening of the economy. That's what they want to do. They want to create... more high-tech jobs in green technology. It's one of their main missions. BUFC Mike saying they're not sure why I think things would be worse than that. When Rachel Reeves was saying she'd be tougher than the Tories on benefit claimants. No, what Labour have actually said is they're going to end the punitive sanction regime. So... You know, again, you need to understand the difference between rhetoric and policy. I don't care what she says to Middle England. What Labour's written down policy is an end to punitive sanctions. And they're not going to say, they're not going to tell doctors that they can't decide whether someone's fit or not. They're not going to give that to someone who's got a 2-page PDF and a pound coin. So you have to look at their actual policies. That's what they're going to deliver on. Barbarian with an MRes, £5. Thank you. It says, has there been any hard evidence on the Abbott case yet, or still the he said, she said stuff? Yeah, that's all. Well, okay, so let's go through the Diane Abbott thing really as quickly as I can, because people will know my attitude. I don't care who it is. My attitude is, if you are a Labour candidate or a Labour MP, if you're a Labour MP, you've been a Labour candidate probably, unless you defected. then your job is to help Labour into government. If you don't want to do that, don't be a Labour candidate. If you're going to attack the Labour Party and the idea of a Labour government, shouldn't be a Labour candidate. But that's my view. In terms of the Diane Abbott thing, I will go through a few things. First of all, Diane Abbott isn't even saying, it's been reported that Diane Abbott says she's been blocked, but she's not even saying that. She's saying she's been told she's been blocked. So Diane Abbott isn't saying she's been blocked. Keir Starmer's not saying she's been blocked. In fact, he was asked, he said, no decision has been made. It doesn't mean to say no decision will be made. I would block her. But in actual fact, what I will say is this. Keir Starmer has only had nice things to say about Diane Abbott, and Diane Abbott has only had malicious things to say about Keir Starmer. One thing she said, for example, this week, Keir Starmer would absolutely have taken us into the Iraq War. Tell you my little story about the Iraq War. So I remember at the time believing that, I mean, I wasn't in favour of it because I thought, well, hang on, but I did think there was legal justification at first because there was a UN resolution which seemed to authorise military force if Iraq didn't do a thing and Iraq hadn't done this thing. So I thought, yeah, okay, so it's legally justified. We shouldn't be doing it. It doesn't seem sensible, particularly as most of the rest of the world were going, no, we don't want to do this. But I did at least think the legal right was there. Then I read an article. And it was by a senior international human rights lawyer arguing against the legal case for the Iraq War. So basically, there was an article that in The Guardian that was written saying, no, we don't have justification to go. And it was arguing against the Iraq War. And who wrote it? Don't need too many guesses. Keir Starmer. So Keir Starmer actually presented a stronger case against the Iraq War than Diane Abbott. And she will know that as well. So she's a proven liar. She is. It doesn't matter that you think in her youth she's done great things in order to break down barriers for black people. She's a liar, and she's a malicious liar, right? It wouldn't surprise me if what's happening here is she's making it up so that if then it turns out she hasn't been blocked, she can say, oh, there you go, we can beat Starmer if we stand together. She's just doing it to attack her own party. That's what I will say about that. In terms of the facts as known, we don't know anything other than that Diane Abbott has lied maliciously about Keir Starmer. We know that for a fact because she said he would have taken us through the Iraq War. And yet you can look it up. You can Google Keir Starmer against Iraq War, The Guardian. You Google it, still there. And so we know that he very, very publicly attacked the idea of the Iraq War. And we do not know that she's been blocked. Keir Starmer has said no decision has been made to block her. He hasn't said no decision will be made to block her. The other thing about, blaming Starmer for it anyway, Starmer doesn't make these decisions. He is responsible for appointing the people who do make the decisions. So he has responsibility. He decides who makes the decisions on selection and he decides what the guidance is. So he is but he's not, he's out and about campaigning every day. He's not sitting there looking at selections. That's another team entirely. And there is, sorry, I have to go to a super chat because this is now where this becomes relevant. Bad Ben's £2. Thank you. Says, thoughts on Akehurst, very divisive, and is he any good? So, yeah, I'm also going to say I'm not in favour of Akehurst being a candidate either. Because here's the thing. Although when we talk about this sort of toxic tribalism in Labour, it's like we see it in the Conservatives because they're less subtle about it. In Labour, they're more subtle. When we talk about this toxic tribalism, often the focus of it is like the sort of what I call the tanky left. A lot of people will call it the left, but I can't call it that because I'm on the left, but I'm not part of them, right? I'm much more, I'm not SCG, I'm much more the other group, the Nadia Whithomes and Clive Lewis and people like that. Those are the people I'd naturally gravitate towards if I were a Labour MP. And yet I could criticise some of those as well. So I don't call it, I call it the tanky left. These, that sort of group. The group that, genocide when it's committed by this country and this country is bad, but genocide when it's committed by this country, this country, and this country, yeah, that's fine. That's not a problem. It's actually their fault, to be honest. It's the victim's fault, really, if you think about it. So that sort of group. We often are particularly harsh on that group because they are the dumbest group. They are the group that stick their heads above the proud parapet. But there are very toxic tribal groups in Labour as well, of which Akehurst is a member, who are also deeply unhelpful. They're just a bit more subtle about it. But I don't like them anymore either. I just hate tribalism. It's destructive. The enemy, and I mean enemy, I don't mean opponent. Opponents are people like the Lib Dems, the Green Party, the SNP. The Tories are the enemy. They actually kill people, and they do it deliberately. You know, 150,000 people killed to austerity in their first 5 years in power. You know, that makes them more than an opponent. That makes them, and that's who the enemy is, not each other. Does my head in. Which is another reason why I don't spend. But then I didn't spend. People say, "Oh, you're not talking about this thing. You're not talking about this thing," on my own channel, that is. And it's like I didn't talk about it in 2019 because, you know, you could look at the selection thing. You could say, well, hang on, they're deselecting these and they're deselecting these. But then they're selecting these and they seem to be sort of just as bad. And it's like, yeah, that's true. And I'm not in favour of that. But that was happening in 2019 as well. In fact, the same people who were going, oh, why they deselected, it's outrageous. They were cheering it when Jeremy Corbyn was deselecting people in 2019 and selecting his own people, including Claudia Webb, who then went on to assault someone and get herself a conviction. Anyway, hold on. Captain Barrows, I may not be able to help you with this one, I'm afraid. £5 super chat. It says, your thoughts on Lloyd, because there's some very pissed off people here on the sunny South Coast. Unfortunately, I don't. There's so much going on at the moment. Unless I have a definite view on a thing, I'm not going to shoot my mouth off based on not enough information. And on that particular one, I don't have enough information, I'm afraid. Graham there saying you can prove anything with fact, Phil. Yeah, even the truth. Rayner has said there's no reason Abbott shouldn't be allowed to stand as a Labour MP. Yeah, but that's because Rayner is also trying to shore up support herself. Rayner's support largely derives from the left of the party. They're all on the left, but, you know, the left of the party. Yeah, it's so basically, I mean, that's politics. At the end of the day, you know, as I said, I would have a strict policy of people that are. So there is a difference. There's tribally divisive people. I don't really want those in Parliament if I was the Labour leader. But there is a difference between those who are tribal within the party, which will cause problems later on, but isn't a massive problem now, and those who publicly attack the party. Those are the ones who really shouldn't be there. At the same time, there are people arguing, like Jess Phillips has argued, it's not a battle worth picking. But then again, we don't even know there is a battle. We don't even know there is a battle. What I will say is this. If Diane Abbott is the Labour candidate, it won't be because Starmer's backs down, because we know he doesn't do that. We know he's utterly ruthless. And there is actually strategic benefit in not having Diane Abbott as a Labour candidate. So if she is a Labour candidate, it's because she was never blocked in the first place. So that's when we will know. But even if she is then blocked subsequently, it's like she's given them every excuse to do so. It's like she's trying to get herself blocked because she wants to make a big deal out of it, because she wants to actually leave Parliament, but do so on an act of spite. Steve Kirk, $9.99 super chat. Thank you very much. But anyway, I mean, you know, we could go on and on about this. It's utterly ridiculous. But there it is. I mean, it'll cause trouble later on. It did last time. You know, one of the big problems we had in 2010. I mean, we look at the Tories now and the infighting is so obvious. It's just spilling out everywhere. But it existed in Labour in 2010 as well. I mean, although I say Gordon Brown was not a good campaigner, he didn't run a good campaign, and ultimately the responsibility for the campaign was he was the party leader. But there was an awful lot of infighting going on within Labour as well. Again, it was a lot more low-key, so a lot of the general members of the public wouldn't have noticed it, but if you're in the party, you noticed it. They can't help themselves. The Labour Party cannot help themselves. You could argue the Tories are no different, but it's just this lack of discipline, which is why it would be better if we selected candidates based on pragmatic politics rather than blinkered ideology, because then they wouldn't scrap with each other. Because what's going to happen is, it's sort of fine now, and this, in terms of cut through to the public, I suspect not at all. I mean, this is all, you know, people who are politically engaged, like everyone here, you're watching a live stream on politics, for example. It's a big thing for us. It's like this massive thing. Oh, it's derailing the campaign. Oh my God, the Guardian are going mad on it. And it's like, yeah, but for most people, it's like, they don't know that. They don't know that. It's not a big deal. It gets a mention. They don't have any opinion on it. It's not going to have major cut through at all. It's not going to affect the polls or anything like that. But at the same time, at some point it will. Because what will happen is, at some point, Labour will get complacent, and then all these little factions will all go to war against each other again. And if these factions exist as like competing think tanks or something, that's different. That's fine. Keep it external. However, if any of these groups are in Parliament, which they will be, that's when you've got problems. That is when you've got problems. So James saying, if Luke Akehurst is a lobbyist for a foreign country, should be nowhere near the legislature. I would agree with that. So I assume you would also agree. I'm not prejudging here, by the way. I assume you would also agree with anyone who advocates for Palestine in the same case then. Because it's one thing or the other. I would agree, by the way. Your focus should be on this country. You can obviously have policies about what's best in terms of world peace. And obviously politicians are allowed foreign policy opinions. But if you're either you say the MPs should not be advocating for a particular country, in which case it applies to all countries. In which case, what you're arguing for, and I think this would be politically careless, you're arguing for every single Labour candidate who has campaigned for Palestine to also be removed, which I think would cause problems if I'm going to be honest. So you have to be consistent on that one. I don't disagree, but even I wouldn't be mad to say, yeah, a quarter of the Parliamentary Labour Party should be sacked. Aidan saying, I'm slightly confused now on what GB Energy is. Is it an EDF-style energy supplier or green energy investment firm? It's largely a green energy investment firm, which of course will then give them stakes in the energy production. So it's sort of both, but because EDF also are an energy investor. That's how energy companies work. You invest in energy production. So it's like the same thing, but what it is specifically investing in green energy rather than just energy production in general. What was really disappointing, actually, I'm just going to have to say this. I saw an absolutely dreadful tweet here. So yeah, they're launching the GB Energy thing today. And I saw something, where is it now? I posted it somewhere. It's absolutely annoying. It really is. So, who's this guy? It's from the Times. Yeah, the Sunday Times, the Whitehall editor. So they've noticed that the symbol for GB, so they've unveiled the symbol, the logo, I should say, the logo. And it appears to be a generic clip art logo that they've grabbed. Which, again, it's like, this is, and my immediate reaction is, this is why you shouldn't use agencies. Like, so now they're going to be ridiculed for the fact that they've used a knockoff for their logo instead of designing it from scratch. I mean, this logo fits. It's a decent logo in itself. It's just that it's not an original logo. They'd have been better off, Labour would have been better off having a competition in schools to get a school kid to design it. They would have come up with something decent. That's how politicians used to do things, you know. Have a little competition. I remember when I was growing up in a mining village, the local pit, you know, we had a competition in our school to design a logo for them. That's how you do it. Get kids to design it. don't pay agencies who will just go, oh, I'll just buy it off clip art. Ridiculous. Why is it GB Energy and not UK Energy? It's a good question. It's a very good question, Vendetta. If I was going to be cheeky, I might say that it's because you could argue with Brexit, it doesn't make sense to call it UK Energy, because Northern Ireland's energy market has access to the EU energy market. So maybe they're trying to avoid any sort of nonsense there. But yeah, it is a very, very good question. It could also be purely political, that Labour they don't compete in Northern Ireland. You know, the sister party over there is the SDLP, so it may be that as well. But I would suggest it's because it might otherwise invite questions as to why Northern Ireland won't really be involved, because they are part of the EU single market for energy. Or they're not part of it, but they have access to it. But there we go. Right, is this the blue and red logo? Dreadful. It is blue and red, I suppose. But I was thinking of more the actual logo. The logo's blue. I mean, the whole thing, if you take it with its title, Great British Energy, the Great British is in red, the energy's in blue, and then the logo's in sort of a mixture of a couple of types of blues. But there it goes. The logo shows Labour are frugal with the money. Well, it's a good logo. It's just that they didn't come up with it. And as I say, wouldn't it have been a really good idea to have just launched a national competition for school kids to design it? Wouldn't that have been a good idea? And I'll tell you what, that would have come up with something. That would have come up with something good. But there we go anyway. I'll just do the very final super chats from Pobafett. Thank you very much. $1.99 super chat. Logo shows Labour. I've just actually read it. Labour frugal with money. It was so good that I'm reading it again, because it's really, yeah, it's an unnecessarily, like, it's drawing ridicule for a big announcement. And again, and this is the issue. This is one of the issues that Labour do have. That's absolutely impossible to deny. You know, it's again an issue of Labour communications, isn't it? It's, you know, using agencies to do things. Using agencies who just want the money, want to do the laziest possible job. They're not invested in your project. No, don't do that. Don't do that. But anyway, there we go. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Anyway, have a very good rest of day. I'm still waiting for the manifesto to come out. But yes, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you hadn't already on your way out. But there we go. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Have a very good day. Until next time, I'll see you later.